Yeah, I think about, Kermit, we're a kind of an interesting mix of senior leadership who are more in their 40s and 50s age-wise, but we have a fairly young cohort of people here for the rest of the company. And these are people that have not grown up in the era of anything but computers and cell phones, right? And so when you think about preparedness and some of the best practices that you used in some of the larger organizations that you've been at and you've brought here to Kermit, talk a little bit about how to be prepared, especially for people that all they know are computers. They're going to be quite lost if we don't prepare them for what happens when those systems are not available to them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've already honed in on the most important. And I tend to categorize these things, and we call them the 3P's, right? You've got, people as a portion of this, protection, controls and systems that you may need to put in place, physical things that we do, and then process, right? How do we bring the people and the protection controls together to create a common strategy for dealing with, InfoSec risk and information security risk? So that first one, right, is the most important leg in all of this, which is your people. Mm-hmm. They are the interaction. They are the targeted folks, believe it or not, in the overwhelming majority of these. And so, the first step that I'd recommend any org, and we've started to do that here at Kermit, and it's been done in pieces and parts over time, is educating those people, right? What are these bad actors? Who are they? How do they operate? How are they trying to get to folks? We know statistically still that, if you look at some of the FBI data that's out there, that, over 97% of these ransomware attacks that happen, or these breaches that take place that we read about, happen as a result of a phishing attack. It starts with that, where some bad actor was targeting somebody within the organization who ended up, responding to that attack, and that opened the door to, potential consequence. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is educate and never stop doing it. Who are these threats? What are these threats? How can they get in? How can they interact? But you got to do that in a culture that's positively reinforcing. So one of the things that I also noticed in Joanne's, interview with you, and that I've seen in other orgs is, you want to build a culture that says, look, if you make the mistake, we understand it can happen. And not only that, we are going to enable the whole org to report it, to manage it, to help us get, the identification of where we're being attacked. You can put all the monitoring tools you want out there. These folks that conduct these activities, these bad actors, are savvy. And so now you're really dealing with targeted phishing, where it's specific to an individual within an organization around something that they would think is familiar. So, right. When we talk about that people leg, it's really about that education practice and then positive reinforcement within your culture that, we all have responsibility in protecting the organization, and there's not going to be, negative consequence for raising the flag, for saying, hey, I think something doesn't make sense with what I'm seeing with communications, with, my daily function and interacting with technology and seeing something that doesn't sound right, doesn't seem right.
And before you move on to the more intricate pieces of this plan, talk a little bit about that, maybe call it social engineering that goes on with a hack. I mean, I think a lot of us who are business owners or maybe just in charge of an organization, but not necessarily all that close to IT, think of this as, this is all dark web stuff, right? These are hackers out on the internet that if we click a link, we're exposing all this information. There's an aspect to this that can be socially engineered too. I mean, if you really want to target a specific organization, it's actually much easier to stand in line every day at the lunch place when you have employees coming through from that organization, get to know one of them, strike up a conversation and figure out where those vulnerabilities lie, right? It's not all just online activity that goes on.
No, it's not. And when we talk about social engineering, I mean, understanding people's habits, practices, likelihood of what their types of activities are. These are all things that, to your point, can happen in an offline setting that can help set up this, the staging for an attack. But when we talk about online now, just go out and Google search yourself. And you're going to find that, your information's available, in multiple sources, whether you're dealing with Zoom info or, your corporate contact info, it's all publicly available now.
Yeah.
And, you take that combination of available data, both online and offline, and these bad actors now can come in and say, listen, I know you're in this role and that you have an interest in this, and all of which is true. And so it starts with truth, which then leads to a specific attack and leads to the mistake. And that's where that education piece is so important, because you can't patrol the entire internet, and you certainly, can't, prevent from sharing, who you are as an individual because of this fear.
Yeah. So maybe, I think, without giving away all the secret stuff you're doing for us here at Kermit, which is really cool to keep us safe, what are kind of the best practices when you think about protection? I know there are a lot of different things from where you start to where you end, and nothing is perfect. But can you give the listeners kind of a high level of things that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing is thinking about, risk posture related to the tools that you may have in the organization when we talk about protection and your policies, right? What is the policies that you have? And so the first thing that, I would kind of hone in on are things that, help regulate identity and access. And so today there's a very common term that's out there called zero trust. And so when we talk about, network and network access, we want to assume that nobody's allowed to access and that we want to prevent that access without specific permission, without going through a specific process. So having a zero trust policy right out of the gate, and that's gotten so much harder with cloud and cloud technologies where folks, now can get to networks and network domains and access, in a plethora of ways, whether you're talking about tablet, cell phone, laptop. It's even stunning at this point where, there's organizations that have vending machines that access their networks to the point that, you're entering your credentials into a vending machine to get your Coke or to get your candy bar.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Wow.
The Internet of Things has opened up the ability to allow multiple devices at any point in time. So zero trust is a big deal. You don't let a device access your network that you're not aware of and that has not had to go through a specific process and a specific protocol. So that's kind of the first thing. When we talk about, non-device types of things that we can do, we want to encrypt all our data. There's just really in today's world no reason for the data and data stores and the way that data is maintained and managed for it not to be encrypted. And, it's minimum 256K. When we talk about that, it can go higher. And certainly there's all kinds of tools out there that can help you with data encryption and the management of data. We want to make sure that we validate the use of that data and access to it, as we kind of talked about it with it here, in multiple ways. So very simple things like multi-factor, which is where you're asking a user or a system to identify itself in multiple methods to ensure that we have the correct person or system getting that access. When we talk about users and user provisioning, one of the things that we've talked about, here at Kermit and other organizations I've been with is role-based provisioning, specifically around PHI and PII. So what does that mean? Not everybody needs access to all PHI, right? It may be that I need the patient demographic and that's all I need because I'm doing some analysis work of some sort. It may be that I really do need patient name and address, et cetera. But you want to compartmentalize that information and you want to set up, your team and the folks that are accessing that against a policy of minimally necessary information to get their function done. And that's really easy to do today. There's lots of ways that you can segregate the data and allow, data permissions, data access within your applications, within your infrastructure to enable that. Other things you can think about, segregating those data sources is a big deal, and that helps kind of that previous point of isolating the information and making it, minimally usable. You can do things like zoning within a network. You can create network zones that isolate that information, those applications, et cetera. And then the last thing that I would recommend, when we talk about the protection side of it is, again, under the assumption things are going to happen. You want visibility as much as you can get to the access to data, the usage of the data, the move of data within your network, within your organization. Almost all of these tools, both hardware and software side, enable logging, and they can tell you what's happened down to the bit. It's pretty incredible. In some cases, right, cost prohibitive, but there are lots of tools you can put out there, even just local client side, that let you know what's happening with access and movement of data. So, you want to have those controls in place so that not only you're stopping potential move and access of data, but you can see what's happening when you've allowed it. So, those are kind of the protection category, and there's lots of things that you can explore in that.
So I can recall, being in charge of an IT group at another job that I had many, many, many years ago. And, we were just kind of starting to learn about information security. What I recall back then, there were just a few tools you could leverage, and they were all fairly expensive. And you had to kind of pick and choose how much you wanted to go after based on the budget you had. You may have a philosophy that like everything is important. We shouldn't worry about cost because information is worth more than money these days, and we should protect it. But have these things gotten cheaper? Are there more competitors now? Is it just as easy to encrypt all of your data as it is just your sensitive data? What's your philosophy on that?
Yeah, and so that's a great point, Rich. And as the proliferation of the attacks have taken place, and these bad actors are bigger, broader, more capable, this information security industry on the technology side's responded, and it's responded with tool sets that are enterprise class all the way down to small business tools. And so I would tell you that there is a set of tools, a suite of tools that is cost manageable. No matter what size organization you are, to help be proactive in getting and enabling tools to stop these types of things and become aware of them. Players out there like Microsoft, they offer a Defender suite at the client level. It's free. And that's an easy one that can be enabled if you're a small business, all the way up to say something like a CrowdStrike, where you're managing your cloud endpoints in a third-party model, and they are actually handling all the security controls around access and monitoring. So there's a plethora of tools out there. We could do a whole nother podcast just on what are the options. But the answer is yes. If you want to go do this, be proactive in addressing these things. There are things out there that are not cost prohibitive that can give you a degree of protection.
Yeah, good to know. That's good to know. So as we put a bow on this show, why don't we leave the listeners and the viewers with kind of some practical things? You're a leader here in the organization. You're speaking with both healthcare leadership, and maybe there's some other folks who are listening, but what's the practical way that you would implement this as a leader? What are the kind of the big things that you think about to build a process around this?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is kind of what you just talked about, is that leadership's got to be willing to just talk about it. Hey, do we have an InfoSec strategy, an information security strategy? If we don't, that's the starting point. Being honest about what you've already discussed and what you may already have in place. And if you don't have a strategy, you need one, without a doubt. The bad guys are planning right now, and you need to be able to have a plan that's going to respond to that. So be deliberate about that, right? Put that out on the table. Ensure that you're building a culture of no fear around that discussion, right? Because one of the things that can happen is, within your leadership base, folks they'll know where their vulnerabilities potentially are, where their gaps are, where they've got folks that, may be, easy targets for that phishing piece we talked about, et cetera. Just be honest. Where are you at in terms of your strategy? Discipline with your planning approach, too, is really important. So don't make this a one-time event. A lot of organizations have been with it in the past. They'll wait for an incident before they start moving down the path of talking about information security. Don't do that. Be proactive. Again, know those bad guys are out there and they're planning right now. So
you wouldn't leave your driveway in a car without car insurance, right?
That's right.
Hoping you don't get in an accident. It seems really logical, but maybe this is one of those areas we just don't like to plan for it because there's so much documentation and we have so many other things to do. But I'm hearing what you're saying. It's really important. Yeah,
it is. It's critical. And so that planning piece we want to get out there. I think there's a degree of humility that's got to happen too. And I kind of touched on that a little bit. Again, you're going to find you've got holes. And, you may also find that you don't have the internal subject matter expertise, given how sophisticated these ththings are these days, and the tools that are available to people that want to harm you from an electronic standpoint. So be humble as an org. If you don't have the subject matter expertise, it's okay. As we kind of talked about, there's a fleet of resources out there now in terms of being able to go bring in some of that expertise. But no, to that very point you just meant, if you don't spend the money in the insurance policy and the accident happens, it's going to be significantly more costly on the backside, without a doubt. Other things that I would tell you is that, you want to build a culture that assumes that the bad event has already happened. And that way you've got folks that are already on guard. You're putting your systems in place to manage for that likelihood that, it isn't that whether you're going to be subject to an attack or whether you're going to be subject to a breach, it's likely already happened. And I actually picked that up. That was a neat thing that was in a little CIO course that I took a few years back that said, come at your information security as though it has already happened. And that gives you a chance to bring, much more proactive approach to the way that you're going at it. And then the last thing that, did come out in Joanne's interview is practice. Go through not only the planning of your disaster recovery plan, of your business continuity plan, but have real life scenarios in there where you can practice and even consider, paying third parties. So one of the things that, that we look at both at Kermit and other orgs is external penetration testing, which is code for paying somebody who is a good actor to pretend that they're a bad actor, and let them test your perimeter, let them test your controls, and see what you get, and be willing to step into those types of things. But practice is really important. So you create your plan. You want to make sure that it's documented. You want to make sure you review it. I'd recommend on a quarterly. That's kind of what we do and other organizations do. And then you want to practice. You want to set up scenarios and really go through and test your plan and see if it's going to meet the need.